Hi spooky friends, welcome back to Kelly Does Stuff. Today we have a viewer request video. How did I make the wooden crates for my ghost town? This is a pretty easy craft, so let's talk about what you're gonna need. We're going to use XPS foam, and this is a great project to dig into your scrap bin of foam. You do not want to use the white EPS foam. This project is all about texturing, and that will not texture well. If you don't have any XPS foam, you can get it at Lowe's or Home Depot, and depending on where you live, there'll be different size sheets available to you. You want a small blade. An X-Acto knife would be great for this. Whatever you use, just make sure your blade is very sharp. Go ahead and just put a new blade in there. Depending on how you're going to make your larger cuts, you might want a larger blade as well. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We want a dull pencil, a ruler if you like to be precise, a wire brush. You can get these at Home Depot. I think I've even gotten them at the dollar store. A hot glue gun, bonus points if yours looks like this, and then acrylic craft paint in whichever colors you prefer. We're going to be making some pretty thin cuts for this project, and I did use my hot wire table. I already had it. I didn't buy it for this project. If the only thing you are going to want to make with foam are some crates, you probably don't want to invest in this. Those are going to be some pretty expensive crates. You might want to just buy them or use some different materials to make your crates. I'll also show you some alternate methods to make those cuts. You can get this off Amazon. It comes with this little slider thingy here to help you make all different types of cuts. You can do circles, you can adjust the angle of the wire. It's a great tool for a lot of projects. I also recommend getting this guide thingy. It does not come with the hot wire table. You have to buy it separately. I got mine off of Etsy. I'll try to link the shop where I got this. It is made for the table. It just kind of slides right in there and kind of helps stabilize some of the taller pieces of foam, so that way you can get a more even cut. You can definitely make these cuts with a blade. You want to make sure that it is incredibly sharp, and it might take a little bit of practice to get a consistent width the whole way, particularly as you are cutting larger strips of the foam. This is probably the hardest cut for me to make with the blade. I'm not very good at being consistent, but to be honest, these are spooky crates. If it's a little uneven, I think that just adds to the spooky factor. If I wanted to make a really thin cut on a larger piece of foam, I'm probably really going to struggle using the blade to get that consistency. But for this project, we're just going to be using smaller pieces, so I think that you will have success with a blade. You also might be able to use a hot wire tool if you have one of these. You want one that is just the wire. I don't think you're going to want a hot wire knife. This could take a little bit of practice as well to get your hands steady and make sure that you've got a straight up and down angle. This is a little bit too thin, but if I adjust for the thickness, I think this tool would work great as well. Okay, the first thing we want to do is cut a cube. Use any tool you want to do this and any size that you want, whatever scale works for you. You guys know I don't measure. I think these are about an inch and a quarter. I kind of like to do them all a little bit different. I think it makes it kind of interesting. Now you could do these perfectly square. I like to do a lot of mine rectangular, so if I'm working with a 1 inch thick piece of foam, I will slice a little bit off of one of the ends to give it a little bit more of a rectangular shape. Now we want to add our wood planks. I don't really measure the distance between these. I kind of just use the ruler as a guide, eyeballing to make sure they're kind of even. Now, if you have a hot wire engraver tool, you could definitely use that here, but I think a pencil is the only thing that you need to get these impressions. And we're going to make these planks all the way around our cube. Next, we're going to use the blade to add some wood grain detail. You could jump right in with the wire brush or do that in addition. I use just the blade for this part, no particular reason, just a preference. All right, now I've got my scrap foam and I'm gonna make some thin cuts. All right, you've probably noticed that your foam has a bit of a coating and a grain to it. Once you cut through that, you notice that you lose it. It's a little softer, the feel of it changes. Whenever possible, I like to do my texturing on the coated part. I think it's just a little bit easier, looks maybe a little bit better. However, you'll probably notice when you did the cubes, you may only have 1 or 2 sides that have the coating. For this part that I'm gonna be adding on top of my cubes, when I make those thin cuts, I want to have at least one side of that coated because that's the side that I want to texture and use. Now we're going to trace and cut out all the sides of our crate. And there are a couple different ways you can do this step. For this first one, we'll do it in stages. I'm going to cut out 2 panels of my wider sections of the crate. We're going to use our dull pencil to make a rectangle or a square, whatever your shape is, and then we're going to draw an X on the inside. And if you like straight lines and measuring, then break out your ruler. We're going to use our really sharp blade to cut out the triangles. If your blade is not super sharp, this is going to tear more than you're going to get a clean cut. You might notice some of your cuts are less clean than others, and that could be the grain. You know, sometimes when I cut against the grain or diagonally, I don't get a perfectly clean cut. You could probably use a nail file, kind of get in there if you want to smooth up all your edges. But these are spooky crates. You know, they're rough. Maybe they came off a pirate ship. They're in a ghost town. I think rough edges add to the spooky factor. Okay, now we're gonna hot glue these in place. Look at this fancy new hot glue gun I got. It has like a smaller tip to it, so I can control the glue a little bit, which is nice when we just want a thin amount of glue here. Keep an eye on the temp of your hot glue gun. You know, if that glue gets way too hot, it will melt through your foam. Now that we've added our X's, you'll see that our other sides are getting a bit wider, so we're gonna trace out 2 panels for 2 of the other sides. We're gonna make our rectangle, and this time we're gonna do just a single diagonal line inside. Cut out our triangles again. Once we hot glue these 2 pieces in place, we're going to repeat the process for the other 2 sides of the crate. And doing it in stages like this is really just about the edges. How fancy do you want to be? Do you want your edges to line up? Do you want some overlap? You could get really fancy with the corners, which you know I'm not going to do. I'll show you another way to do it where we're going to cut all of our panels at the same time. Okay, so here's my first crate. I feel like the little panels that I added are a little bit thick. So for my next one, I'm going to go even thinner. And I'm going to make my cuts and do my X's and diagonals all at once. You can see when we cut all our panels at once, we're gonna have some gaps in between our edges. I actually kind of like this look. Some of them I do this way. It gives it an extra kind of roughness to it. Some of them I line everything up. What I definitely like better is when my panels, those X's on diagonals, are thinner. I typically will make a bunch of these at once and they all look a little bit different. We're going to use the wire brush to add the wood grain detail onto these panels, and I like to do this step after I have glued those panels onto the cube because that foam is so thin, it may have a tendency to rip or break, and doing it this way helps it not do that. And if you want, you can add some holes to the corners to make it look like there are nails keeping it all together. To paint them, I'm starting with a black base coat, and then when that completely dries, I will do a dark brown dry brushing. For my next lightest shade, I'm going to mix black and brown together with some white, and the reason I add the black in there is because I want a brown shade, but I want it to have a hint of gray, and the black helps give it that tone. And for some of the crates, I dry brush this color in first, sometimes just by itself, sometimes with a little bit of white or a little bit of the brown, just to add a little bit more dimension before I add on that brownish gray color. Just have fun with this and experiment with what you like. If these were pulled out of a swamp, or if they're pirate crates pulled out of the sea, you might have a little bit of green on them. You are the creator of your crate universe. You can make them look any way that you want. Those are the crates that I have in my ghost town, but you might want to up the spooky factor a little bit and have a skeleton hand sticking out of a crate. This is just one of the skeletons that you can get at Michael's or the dollar store, and the hand or foot or whatever you want should pull off pretty easily. I used the blade to make a little bit of a hole for that hand to slide in there, and the fingers do have a little bit of flexibility if you get this type of skeleton. If you bend them too much, they will snap off. I wanted the hand to kind of be curling down a little bit, so there's a little bit of movement you can do with them. And as I was texturing the crate, I decided I liked it better on the side. I thought it was a little bit more interesting than just dead center. And I didn't even need to make a little slit, just the indentation from the pencil created enough of a space to slide that hand in there. Maybe you want an open crate that you can put things in. So instead of starting with a cube, you're going to cut out a base and 4 sides, create all your wood grain detail, and then glue everything in place. Leave the top off. I'm gonna fill this with some coconut fiber, and I'm thinking for this crate, it's pretty creepy. So there's gonna be a skull in here, and some maggots have also worked their way in. You could hot glue the cover to a corner, lean it in the front, tuck it into the back somewhere, or just leave it off altogether. Maybe you want a little friendlier type of crate, perhaps for some pumpkins for your pumpkin patch. And that is all she wrote. Thank you so much for joining me for this crate tutorial. I would love it so much if you could like this video, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. A huge thank you to all of you who have subscribed. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Happy creating!